Tony Ritchie and Doug and Tim and everybody's here. So thank you so much. As Dr. Antonio mentioned, I am a neuroscientist, but we've been working very closely together for what, like maybe the last 5 years or so. So it's been a lot of fun. You can find out more about the Society for Neurosports if you follow our Instagram page. I'm not as good as Jose is at social media, so I'm pretty lazy on Twitter, actually.
Do better.
I need to do better. So this is a little bit of an announcement about our newest venture. We have been doing so much research together, and part of the reason is that every time we do a research study, it seems like there's 20 more that we just randomly come up with. And there's a lot of interesting work that can be done at the intersection of neuroscience and exercise science and sports science, as Dr. Ritchie knows all too well. So please come out and see us. We will be virtual and in person. Okay. So if you didn't want to pay attention to my talk and you want to just go eat breakfast after this, this is pretty much the only slide you need to see. A lot of people, especially people in the performance field, think that sleep is an option, and it's just non-negotiable. On average, humans have to get 8 hours a night, and if you don't get 8 hours a night, you will suffer. The problem with not having enough sleep is it's a lot like having too much alcohol. We are not the best at determining our state after having sleep restriction or sleep loss. So you can either take my word for it or you can listen to the rest of the presentation. And I'm really glad I went after Dr. Ormsby, because I think a lot of the research I'm going to talk about is nicely complementary to him, and I would never disagree with anything he says. So he was wrong about that. Okay. Let's move forward. Okay. So just as a quick review, we recognize that we have a very critical sleep architecture that we have to go through. From that period of wakefulness, we go into that first stage of sleep, and then we go into these like deeper stages of sleep, stages N3, previously known as stage 3 and stage 4. This is our slow wave sleep, and this is really important. We're going to find out for a lot of our declarative memory consolidation, repair and restoration. This is literally when your brain cleans out all the metabolic waste products throughout the day, such as beta amyloid protein. And then from the slow wave sleep, we go back into lighter sleep, not back into stage 1. Instead, we go into REM sleep. REM sleep combined with sleep spindles that happen in stage 2 sleep are critical for motor memory consolidation. And this is very important, obviously, for athletes. We don't learn, whether it's motor learning or declarative memory learning, we don't learn within a day. You can potentiate within a day, but real learning happens when you're sleeping, whether it's procedural or declarative. So right off the bat, you can see that you absolutely need to have sleep in order to perform well. Especially when you think about some of those metabolic waste products. The brain doesn't have a lymph system, but it has a glymphatic system. So the glymphatic system works during slow wave sleep to sort of take out the trash during the night. So you go through these stages, you go through these about 5 times throughout the night. It takes about 90 minutes to get through. First part of the night, hang out in slow wave sleep a little bit longer. As you get closer and closer to morning, hang out in REM sleep a little bit longer. And this sleep architecture has to be consolidated. So you can't get 3 hours here and 2 hours there. It's got to be 8 solid hours. And when I say 8, just recognize I'm talking obviously about the average person. Just like height, some people biologically can get away with less sleep. Some people biologically might need more, but on average, we're talking about 8 hours. Everybody thinks they're the people who need less, though. It just happens not to be true. So when I think about sleep, and when a lot of biologists think about sort of natural human conditions, oftentimes we look sort of to these hunter-gatherer populations. So Jerry Spiegel did a lot of work with these groups, the Tsunami, the Hadza, down in the Kalahari Desert, the Kalahari Sand group. And he put on these little actigraphs. They're just little wristwatch devices that we use in my lab. And they do a pretty good job of determining sleep duration. And when we look at these groups, what we find out is they're sleeping more than enough, probably still not enough to what they need biologically, but about 7 hours, whereas industrialized humans were about 6 hours. And what's remarkably different from these populations to us are 2 environmental factors. One is the temperature, and the other one is light regulation. So one of the worst things that we do for our sleep health is expose ourselves to light at the wrong times of day. So your intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, right, these little cells in your eyes, their only job is to basically say, oh, there's blue light or there's not blue light, right, and help to regulate melatonin levels. They're directly connected to your hypothalamus, to that little clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus in your hypothalamus. So your brain is exquisitely sensitive to blue light to help to regulate its sleep, short wavelength light. And the other thing that's kind of remarkable about this group is that they don't sleep when the sun goes down. And this was in all three of these sort of hunter-gatherer populations. They sleep when the temperature drops. So I have this here in Celsius, but then Fahrenheit for all of us Americans that don't do Celsius very well. So you can see that so this is like Florida temperature, I guess, right? So 86 degrees during the day, sunset drops to 74, but they don't really sleep until the temperature drops to 61. So they're not sleeping when it gets dark, they're sleeping when the temperature drops. And a lot of sleep researchers have followed up on this using these intricate ways of cooling the body down with water bodysuits. And it seems to replicate over and over again. A drop in core body temperature is a good signal to go night-night. And again, these are those little light, intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. Their only job is to communicate to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is our internal clock, and to help to regulate the release of melatonin from the pineal gland. I think this is so important that I actually have a special light in my office that's just there to emulate blue light. And during the day, I turn it down to make it a little bit darker and darker. So I even abide by this myself to varying degrees of success. Okay, so that's just sort of our quick and dirty review of just sort of reminding us all why sleep kind of matters, but you don't want to take my word for it. So I'm going to prove to you through some data why sleep affects performance. And when we do this in my lab, we do two different types of studies, as do all sleep researchers. We look sometimes at sleep deprivation, which is keeping somebody up for a certain period of time and not allowing them to sleep. Now we're using these sort of single channel EEG bands, so we can really determine whether or not someone's even having micro sleeps. And this is different than what most humans experience, and that's chronic sleep restriction. Most people aren't staying up all night. I haven't done this since college, right? Since I was in the Army, I was really good at that. But now it's difficult, right? We don't 24-hour sleep deprive. But what most of us do is we have chronic sleep restriction, which means we're going to bed late and we're waking up for work the next morning. So we're maybe getting 6 hours of sleep, probably on the weekends, this is what I do, right? Probably on the weekends, we're paying off that sleep debt. And the needs and the pressures on an industrialized human, especially in the US, require that person usually to get up at 7 a.m. for a job. So whether they went to bed at midnight or 1, they still have to get up at 7. And it's for this reason that chronotype seems to predict success in industrialized nations. If you're someone like Dr. Antonio and you wake up at 5 a.m. naturally because you're a lark, that's fantastic for you. Lots of research suggests that larks do better, right? We reward them for that behavior. So they make more money, they're happier. Unfortunately, if you're an owl, you don't seem to do as well, right? Because your chronotype doesn't seem to match sort of the needs and the requirements of your job. So you go to bed late at night throughout the week, then you wake up, 6 or 7 a.m. and you suffer from what we talk about as chronic sleep restriction. So I'm naturally an owl, so I feel you if you are an owl. It's awful, but I work with it. I'm just really jealous of my friends who are larks. Okay, so some of these classic studies showed, does chronic sleep deprivation decrease performance? And these are very simple tasks that they're using. These are just basically finger tapping tasks, right? Psychomotor vigilance tasks. And what these studies show, this is the Thorne study, so this is the one everybody cites, but lots of studies have basically shown that there is pretty much a linear degradation in performance. And what we see is a speed accuracy trade-off. If you want to be accurate, you're going to slow down on these tasks. There's really no way of fixing that. But I said most people aren't sleep deprived, they're sleep restriction. So what about you, sleep restriction? Same thing. We have some other pretty classic studies at this point that demonstrate a very similar phenomena, that if you take sleep away from people, and a lot of these studies we prescribe time in bed because you can't force somebody to sleep or not sleep, but you can force the amount of time that they're in bed. So you can see 3-hour time in bed is pretty detrimental to cognitive performance. These are sort of attentional lapses. 5 hours, even 7 hours, you're not doing as well as 8 hours. And you can see it gets worse as you keep doing this over a period of days. Short sleep duration, if you look at sort of Twitter accounts as a way of gauging sleep, fewer point scored, fewer rebounds. So these are NBA players not doing well at all. And if you even look at just sort of male and female athletes, just sleep quality alone, poor sleep quality is an independent predictor of whether you're going to lose the competition. Sleep duration is a pretty good predictor of how well you're going to do. If you increase sleep by extending it to 8.5 hours, so basically just getting it up to that normal amount of sleep, that required amount of sleep, 9% increase in free throw accuracy. So can you imagine if you could give somebody a sports supplement? Can you imagine if creatine increased free throw accuracy by 9%? College tennis players, again, you give them increased sleep extension protocol, they go up to a 41 from a 36% increase in serving accuracy. And so what matters is all of it, right? It's not just how long you sleep, it's the depth, right? How are you getting good slow wave sleep? Are you sleeping 8 hours? Are you waking up a lot during the night? Or are you getting that good continuous sleep? And what is your sleep quality like? Like most of us, athletes are human and pretty bad at determining for themselves how much sleep that they need. But we want to pay attention to all four of these things. And I should add, you know, as we get older, like, you know, we're all getting older. what seems to really get harder for you as you get older is depth. You're not as good at getting slow wave sleep when you're older as you were when you're younger. Unfortunately, sleep depth is a young person's game, but the rest of us do the best we can. So in my lab, we're really interested in, you know, one of the things we're interested in is sleep and performance, recognizing that this is incredibly complicated. There are so many factors going into sleep and performance, and we try our best to pay attention to all of this. So we finished up a recent study where we're trying to look at multiple measures, neurobehavioral measures, physiological measures, and hoping to put these all together. I actually just made some of these graphs yesterday, so it's sort of hot off the press data that I'm going to show you. And in order to do all the studies that I talk about with sleep, we use a combination of PSG, where we actually record their brainwaves, whether they're in wakefulness or sleep. We use single channel EEG headbands, and we use those actigraphs as a way to measure sleep in all of the studies that we do, sleep or ensure that somebody is experiencing wakefulness. Okay, so here are these hot off the press data. I'm always worried about showing unpublished data, but I feel like if I do, then it'll motivate me to publish them before anybody can scoop me. That's my goal. So this is sleep deprivation. So one of the things we looked at was inflammation. This is 24 hours of sleep deprivation, everything males and females. We had about 13 people in this study. As Dr. Ormsby said, you know, working with humans is difficult, and working with humans and sleep depriving them is very difficult. They don't like it. So we did see significant increases in interleukin 6 and C-reactive protein, nothing for interleukin 1 beta. I thought this would be interesting for this group, which is why I wanted to definitely look at these data. We did see a significant increase in ghrelin, you know, the so-called hunger hormone, and maybe a trend towards decreased leptin. But other studies have shown this as well, right? You are hungrier with sleep loss, and actually independently sometimes of even food consumption. When you chronic sleep restrict, you gain weight, and there's a very close association between obesity and sleep loss because of some of the metabolic changes that occur and basic changes to hunger hormones. And it also appears to make you crave carbohydrates over other types of food as well. So despite the fact that you have a higher metabolic usage, or you're up, you're moving around as opposed to laying in bed, that doesn't seem to make a difference. If you sleep less, you will still gain weight, and I think for reasons that we don't completely understand still. And we asked about mood as well, and this is really important because mood plays such an important role in so many other things, like such as cognition, such as whether we're going to eat carbohydrates versus vegetables, right? Some of the things that we choose and the decisions that we make. And this is something that we've shown before, right? Mood is just the first thing to go. If your brain's going to throw out things after sleep deprivation, your ability to regulate your mood seems to be one of the first things that it's going to get rid of. So you can see increased tension, increased anger, and we sort of subjectively observe some of these behaviors, increased confusion, increased state trait anxiety. So just emotionally not well. We also looked at cognition, and I was going to analyze this data last night, but then I really wanted to start relaxing and drinking wine. So decisions were made, and you're going to have to wait to see those data. But I promise I will write them up very soon. I can tell you one of the interesting cognitive findings that we observed was an increase in risk-taking behavior. So people made riskier decisions after a night of sleep deprivation as well. So please forgive me, it was a long day. So getting back to the brain, it's fun to ask people about their mood, but we really want to look at the brain itself to see what are some of the brain changes happening when people are sleep deprived. So a different group of people, sleep deprived. We're looking at this very sensitive measure to emotion. So you can see the green and the red lines here. This is an event-related potential. This is sort of a standard what's called an event-related potential, ERP, a standard measure called the LPP. And this happens when I show you anything emotional, like a flower, a cute little seal, or if I show you anything negative, like a snake, like a burn victim, you'll get this emotional response to positive or negative information, as opposed to like a coffee cup. And you can see the black line. People don't respond emotionally to coffee cups. It's very fast, and it's happening at a subcortical level, way down at the level of the limbic system, 300 milliseconds after the stimulus comes on. So here we showed something really interesting. After sleep deprivation in a counterbalanced study, you can see at baseline, people are responding to emotional pictures, but not to neutral pictures. After sleep deprivation, their brain is saying everything is emotional, right? We show them a coffee cup, emotional. We show them a puppy, emotional. We show them a pencil, emotional. So everything the brain is interpreting as emotional. But what was interesting was that they were still able to consciously rate these pictures into their proper categories. So they could say, oh, flower is good. Oh, that burn victim is bad, that pencil is neutral, but at that subconscious level, their brain was still responding to everything as if it was, mutilated body. So this is part of that sort of emotional instability that we see. The limbic system has heightened emotionality, where that sort of frontal lobe part of your brain that can make decisions, he's working just fine, and they're disagreeing with each other. We even saw this if we compared early morning compared to later in the evening. You can see that people are starting to have a little bit of that emotional instability at night relative to in the morning. And we know this is true. If we've ever gotten an argument with somebody at night, you're not always emotionally at your best. Even if we look at sleep quality, cognition goes down, poor sleep quality, you have poorer target accuracy and increased negativity bias. So you are more likely to respond to negative stimuli than you are to positive stimuli. So then increased negativity bias that we all have is heightened with poor sleep quality. And so is our ability to have target accuracy or good cognitive processing is impaired as well with poor sleep quality. So we didn't change their sleep. We're just looking at people who have naturally poor sleep quality. One of the other things that we saw, a different group of people, 24 hours of sleep deprivation is no bueno for these sort of metabolic markers. So we did some line methylation, two of our measures of line methylation, methylcysteine. We have significantly increased methylation. Hydroxymethylcytosine also significantly decreased. Whole genome methylation. We need to follow up and look at where the methylation occurred. So glutathione, we had significant decreases. So potentially changes in antioxidant levels with sleep deprivation. Significantly decreased ATP, and morning cortisol was blunted. And you might think that's a good thing, but you really want a cortisol awakening response. You want cortisol levels to be high in the morning. That's good for you. That helps you contend with your day. It's actually, when you don't have this, is one of the biomarkers for depression. So you want to have high cortisol levels in the morning relative to later on in the day. So that cortisol awakening response was blunted after one night of sleep deprivation. We also looked at some microRNA expression. And because of one of my students, our student Xavier, this is my husband, we kind of work together sometimes. And this was an intern that we shared, Xavier, and he was interested in microRNAs that are associated with cancer risk. So we did see differential expression after sleep deprivation, significant increase of microRNAs that are associated with cancer risk. And we think this is a transient change, and it probably goes back. We don't know what the long-term effects are. We do know that blue light at night is considered a carcinogen, and that sleep is related to cancer risk. But these were just very transient changes in microRNAs. So I don't want anybody to be overly alarmed. We suspect they go back when the people go to sleep. We just didn't do that part because it's expensive. Okay, so what about chronic sleep restriction and inflammation? So this is not sleep deprivation. So it seems like if you do chronic sleep restrict, if you go to bed late, it seems to be a little bit worse for you than if you go to bed at the right time, earlier in the night. So chronic sleep restriction with a sleep delay has significantly increased cortisol and interleukin-1 beta. where if you just chronically restrict, you only have a significant increase in interleukin-1 beta. So this combination indicates what starts to look like glucocorticoid resistance, because the job of cortisol obviously is to rein in the immune system. And so when you see high cortisol with inflammation, it seems like potentially we're getting some resistance to those glucocorticoid receptors. The glucocorticoid receptors are becoming resistant. And you can see on my slides, I put all my friends who helped me with these studies, because I have really cool friends. I'm pretty good looking too, so I put them on here. Except that guy. No, I'm just kidding. He's my friend too. So we also wanted to look at gut microbiome. So with these, we had people wear our little actigraph watches, followed them around for a month, and looked at gut microbiome because it's a really sexy thing to look at right now. And my friend Joe is really into gut microbiome research and microbiome. And he looks at like ocean microbiome. He's a really cool guy. So we did see this relationship between diversity and richness, poor sleep efficiency, poor gut microbiome diversity, and poor gut microbiome richness. One of the interesting things about this study was that interleukin-6 appeared to be one of the linchpins. And I only bring that up because every study I do, most studies I do, interleukin-6 keeps coming up as one of those important persons. So if I was like a hedge fund guy, I would be investing money in interleukin-6 right now. And it is interesting because it's also a myokine, right? So this is so you can say you heard it here first when you find out all the important things that interleukin-6 is probably involved in. But he was connected to neurobehavior, gut microbiome, sleep. There was really nothing he wasn't showing a relationship with in this particular study. One of the things I want to bring up is also the importance of looking at individual differences. So we do look at sort of SNPs and genotypes because we know that in our work, like Dr. Ormans was saying, like we work with people, and we're always looking at averages, but not everybody in these groups respond the same way. So as we start to look at, for example, monoamine oxidase A activity, this is a good predictor of dopamine levels. So people who have low MAOA activity should have higher dopamine and potentially poorer sleep because it's associated with wakefulness, and that's exactly what we saw. We also see that for these, I wanted to do this study because I'm a night owl, right? So we wanted to look at those night owl genotypes and look at some of those measures that they seem to do bad with, having anxiety and depression and those things. And it seems like if you're a night owl, but you can get good sleep, you seem to be okay on some of these measures. It's really the night owls, like we suspected, right? It's the night owls who are just not sleeping enough because they're waking up too early in the morning that seem to be getting into issues with anxiety and depression. And these are genetic night owls, so we didn't ask them about their sleep, we just genotype them. And I know we had just heard about protein and after exercise at night. Well, the only study that we did like this was with Victoria Burgess, who recently earned her PhD. This is with Dr. Antonio. And it turns out, and I really liked hearing that, it turns out that it doesn't matter when you work out. We didn't see any difference in any of our measures of sleep if people worked out in the morning or they worked out in the evening. And there's some idea that even some of those that like little low-grade inflammation that you might get during a workout could help with sleepiness, because we know like interleukin-1B is really important for helping you feel sleepy. This is the cytokine that makes you feel sleepy when you have a virus or you're infected or you're otherwise sick, right? So it would make sense that if these guys are released at low levels during exercise, that could also induce sleepiness. So we would suggest, because anecdotally people said don't work out at night. So I'm glad that we could show it doesn't matter. So exercise when it works for you, right? And so it's to sort of summarize a little bit, because it's all bad news, right? I'm like, oh, this is bad, you're gonna have poor ATP, you're gonna be ugly, you're gonna be fat, right? So all these things sound really bad, but I can tell you some of the things that I do to sleep better. And the most important thing, and I really can't emphasize this enough, is light regulation. And it is not something that people take seriously. And I told you that light at night is considered a carcinogen. Shift work is associated with things like breast cancer. So you really want to be mindful of your light exposure, and you want to get that low frequency blue light in the morning and then taper that off throughout the day to try to emulate as much as possible that natural human condition. Millions of years of evolution have sort of wired your brain to use light as the key zeitgeber, the key timekeeper for your circadian rhythm. So, turn off your lights at night. Make sure that you're in a dim environment. This is silly because we all worry, right? But the more you ruminate, so most causes of insomnia are just rumination, is anxiety. So to the extent possible, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's meditation, whatever strategy works for you to get those worries under control at night. I know the worst things are always happening to me at midnight, and then by the morning it's fine. So you really want to wake up and go to bed at the same time. The suprachiasmatic nucleus is in the hypothalamus, and that's where, as you probably know, a lot of your hormones are originally regulated through the hypothalamus. So once he becomes dysregulated, some of those hormones can also become misaligned. Their circadian rhythms can become misaligned. So you want to wake up and go to bed around the same time every day. Drop that temperature at night. If I get divorced from my husband, it's going to be for this reason, because I like to drop the temperature at night and he does not. Because I think sometimes dads, they like to have power over the thermostat. So, be like our sand tribe and drop your temperature at night. Physical activity is overwhelmingly shown to help with sleep depth and sleep duration and all of those pillars of sleep. You don't want to condition yourself to sleep, to have your bed associated with other activities. This is basic classical conditioning. So if you're watching TV in bed and you're on the phone in bed and you're doing everything and you're going to work, a lot of time my kids, they want to have school in their beds. I make them sit at their desks. You can have sex in your bed, but don't, that's okay. But try as much as possible to use your bed only for sleep. You want your brain to associate bed with sleep. Caffeine is important. Caffeine antagonizes the adenosine receptor, which is that chemical compound that builds up throughout the day to make us feel sleepy. So you really want to be careful about caffeine intake. And the naps is tricky. If you can take a nap and still sleep 8 hours a night, great. But if naps are keeping you up all night, you want to limit those daytime naps. And with napping, you want to be careful that you're not in the middle of slow wave sleep when you wake up. So either 15 minutes so that you don't get into slow wave, or give yourself that full 90 minutes. Otherwise, sometimes if you wake up after a 40-minute nap, you'll have a lot of sleep inertia and you might feel groggy for the rest of the day. So I wanted to end, dude, I've got 1 minute. So thank you guys so much.
Hey, Dr. Tartar, we have, you got 30 seconds. Actually, I'm going to ask you one question that someone put in the chat box, because I think a lot of people ask the same question.